Lost Ark, a unique MMORPG that will finally have its long-awaited Western release this February. But what exactly is this game, why is it praised so highly by everyone, and how much does it resemble the classic ARPGs that we are used to? I'll give you my honest opinion as a player who spent thousands of hours in Diablo 3 and other ARPGs, while also having a decade-long MMO experience behind me. If you are here for the short answer, then it is an excellent game, but it is an MMO with ARPG elements and not the other way around. Meaning that the primary target audience of this game, in my opinion, are the MMO players. But of course it isn't this simple, as it is a game like no other, getting inspiration from and merging together many different genres in a very clever way. But for the time being, let's just focus on those ARPG elements. What exactly do ARPG players look for in their game? For me, on one side, it is the creative development of a character, which includes the thrill of hunting for exciting loot, gearing up and creating unique builds. And on the other side, the game must also give an addictively satisfying but also challenging combat experience. So it must feel good to slay thousands of monsters on a daily basis, which is the primary reason why I have been playing Diablo 3 for so long. So let's just see how Lost Ark handles these elements. Building up your character in Lost Ark is quite different than in other ARPGs. You do find loot on the ground, which also has some randomness in its stats and quality, but it is still much more fixed than in other ARPGs, meaning you will acquire your desired item pieces in a short time, either by finding, crafting, or trading with other players. The game has a much larger focus on upgrading your item pieces rather than finding them. And this is where the complexity of character building in Lost Ark is. There are many different ways you can empower your character in this game, all of which act like a separate minigame and would require an entire video to explain. But in short, the primary things you are grinding for in this game aren't the items, but crafting materials that will allow you to improve your character in various ways. The term grind also has a different meaning here. It isn't like in, for example, Diablo 3, where you can spam speed GRs an entire day and you will make good progress. Technically, in this game you can also spam a single type of content as much as you like, it just won't be worth it, as most content will only reward you the first few times you complete it daily or weekly, which means that the game encourages you to build your character by playing various content on a regular basis. Fortunately, there are many different activities you can participate in, and they will all contribute to making your character stronger in one way or another. The game has a heavy emphasis on rewarding you for doing what you enjoy, rather than forcing you into doing specific stuff that you don't. Meaning that the same item or resource can usually be acquired by doing different activities, and it is up to you to choose what you enjoy more. There are a million different resources and collectibles that you can gather up in this game, but there is one that I would like to highlight. Similarly to Diablo 2, you gain skill points for leveling up, and the leveling process also becomes very slow after a certain point. But as in Diablo 2, you can gain additional skill points from different sources. Skill point potions are one of the most valuable endgame items that you can aim for. And I will be honest, I really like this, since unlike simple stat increases, skill points open up additional possibilities to build your character. So let's see what it means in Lost Ark, by checking out, in my opinion, one of its biggest selling points, the skill and combat system. In a traditional ARPG, you usually have one or two active skills that deal damage at a given time. and the other abilities are mainly there to support your build and maybe create a rotation that you repeat over and over again, creating an addictive loop that, given enough practice, you subconsciously start to apply anytime you see a bunch of monsters. This is quite a bit different in Lost Ark. There will be 15 classes at launch, each having a ton of different abilities to choose from. The number of active abilities at a given time is also quite high, with most classes having 8, while the Gunslinger, for example, having 16 active abilities any given time. So it is quite a few buttons to memorize. What also stands out is that most of these abilities are there to deal damage. And while initially you might get away by using whichever abilities and whenever you feel like, the further you progress in the game, you will soon realize that every button you press matters, since most abilities have extra special effects that you need to apply at the right times, while you can also often combo them for better results. For me, the game actually feels like an isometric fighting game, which is especially true for the PvP part, which has many mechanics that resemble the fighting game genre. If the number of abilities wasn't enough, the game also has the so-called tripod system. This is basically the rune system of Diablo 3, but with a twist. There are 3 tiers for each of your abilities, and on each tier you can choose from multiple different runes, or in this case tripods, which vary from simple stuff like giving you a bit of extra damage to completely altering the way the skill behaves. And this is where you spend your skill points that you earn from leveling and doing some endgame content. You can imagine how many different ways you can build a character just by using the skill system in the game. Oh, and by the way, you can completely respec at any given time to experiment with different builds, unlike in some other more restrictive ARPGs. Now let me say it out loud that the feel of the combat in Lost Ark is unquestionably superb. Without a doubt, this is the most satisfying combat experience I've ever felt in any MMO, and probably in any ARPG too. As someone who spent a fair bit of time animating stuff, I have a keen eye for good animation in video games. This game handles animation like few other, with so much attention to every little detail, it's just mind-blowing. Add to this some outstanding visuals and one of the best sound designs I ever heard in any game. And you already get an addictive feedback loop, even if you just randomly mash those buttons. One thing to note is that, as you have probably noticed by now, the game has an Eastern art style, which I know puts off a few people. It has already been westernized to some degree in our version, but it is undeniably still a bit over the top at places. Which for me, as someone who's grown up on Dragon Ball and alike, is actually quite fun and isn't a problem to take in. And I honestly think it wouldn't take more than a few hours to get totally used to it. So I wouldn't put an otherwise outstanding game aside just for something like this.
Miserable yours will.
Just a few words about what it looks like to level up a character in Lost Ark and also what you can do once you are done with it. Leveling your first character to 50 in Lost Ark takes around 20 hours, which is quite fast compared to similar games. So it isn't a big commitment to level up and try out different classes, and by the way, it is something that the game also rewards, since part of your progression is account-wide. You can level up your character and can do a big portion of the endgame activities, even if you decide to playing completely solo. Now I won't waste too much time on this, because I know it isn't important for most players out there, but the leveling experience in the game is actually quite fun. It is heavily story-driven, with a bunch of cinematics along the way, while the questing experience is also very cleverly made, with close to zero backtracking, different zones following each other seamlessly, while you also never really feel that you are doing chores. It is clearly visible that despite it isn't important for most players, the devs still put in great effort into the leveling process of the game, which is quite respectable in my opinion. But it is undeniable that the game truly starts once you hit level 50. Now I obviously won't go over all the million different activities you can do in this game, I would rather just highlight a few I think are more important. Chaos dungeons are similar to the Nephalem Rifts of Diablo 3, where you get a randomized map with random monsters and you gain progression by just killing stuff. Since Chaos dungeons lack the challenging boss fight at the end, there is a separate activity dedicated just to that. Guardian raids require you to track down and successfully defeat a single challenging enemy, a Guardian. It is like Monster Hunter, but it can also resemble Uber bosses in Diablo to some extent. Chaos dungeons and Guardian raids both have a time limit to complete, and you can do them even if you play in solo. Abyssal Dungeon, on the other hand, is a more challenging form of content that requires a party of 4 to complete. It is similar to Mythic Dungeons in WoW, where you need to clear out some trash and then defeat some challenging bosses. This will be the most challenging content at the Western launch, while we will gradually receive additional content that's already in the Korean version. There are of course a bunch of additional things that you can do, some are more challenging than the others, while even if you just decide to explore the world and do some side activities, you will still improve your character in a meaningful way. And of course, if you are by any chance a fan of PvP, then this game will get you covered on that as well, with its primary competitive PvP content being 3v3 deathmatch. But you can also play additional modes like Free for All or 1v1, as well as you can participate in outdoor PvP events. Most PvP content in the game is equalized, meaning that your gear doesn't matter. It is just about your personal skills. Like the rest of the challenging content in the game, it has a steep learning curve, which also means that once you get a hang of it, it will feel truly rewarding. So these are my 2 cents about Lost Ark. And to sum it up, is this a traditional MMO or ARPG that you might be used to? The answer is no, not really. But it certainly is a unique game that tries its best to merge together the best of all worlds, while creating something that hasn't really been done before, or at least not in this quality. The game will launch with an insane amount of content, which is still just a fraction of what's to come based on the Korean version. Lost Ark will be released for NA and EU on February 11th, and I will 100% play it and try to cover it as well. And if you take a liking for it yourself, then you can try it out since it is free to play. Anyways, thank you for listening to my thoughts. I will soon come with a bunch of additional content. So until we meet again.